Нет. Хорошо. Тогда начнем. Can you switch on? Thanks. There will be three phases of this meeting. First, I would like to provide some background on global destabilization or archaization of the global system. This will be without slides, and I will try to even show you some self-made pictures on the board. Then the second part will be on understanding globalization. Means we'll go step by step, pretty quickly, through the basic aspects of globalization and different incarnations of globalization and so on and so forth, to come in the last section to the idea of development. What is development? What is growth? Development, how we are measuring growth and development, and what does it mean for the globalization as a process. So let me start with the first section on archaization of global governance. It became quite trivial to say that there is plenty of instability in the world, and you can see this around you. No one can predict what will be tomorrow, and no one can say the same not only about the politics but about the global markets. It seems that we lost control over the system. Valdai Club last year prepared a special report in which they say, I quote, "The world is returning to the area of blatant and shameless competition." This peaceful area, peaceful period of globalization, in which under the guidance of United States, obviously, which was the main promoter of globalization in the 1970s, under the guidance of United States, several processes were shaped into increasing cooperation. Globalization is about breaking the barriers and homogenizing societies, homogenizing economies, homogenizing values, including social values and political values, and so on and so forth. We'll be talking about this later. But the process was going relatively smoothly, without major international confrontation until 2008, when you were witnessing the first of the serious crises related to the financial crisis of 2008-2010, which started from the collapse of the Lehman Brothers Bank. Today is the 10th anniversary of this crisis. It started 10 years ago, when the world savings, or world wealth, if you wish, lost about 30% of its value. And it took another 10 years to be more or less in the same position in the accumulation of wealth globally that we have been 10 years ago. But anyway, what is going on right now is that this shameless competition, as the Valdai Club mentioned in the report, is becoming a trademark, is becoming a new norm, if you wish, in global international economic relations. Why is it so? Why we started something that looks more and more like an economic war or set of wars? Why we're witnessing more intense competition, not only in the area of economics, but also in the area of politics? Why we think that we are closer to the global war that we have been a few years ago? Good question. Good question. And I will try at least to propose a certain set of answers in the next half an hour or 40 minutes. Are you leaving for good, or you are coming back?
Just 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm sorry.
So, if we are saying that confrontation is already in place, then we should come up with the answer why. And I propose the first set of explanations that are related to the so-called catching up process. In 15th century, countries of today's East Asia and Southeast Asia were dominating the world economic system. Their GDP per capita was higher, much higher than in Europe. Obviously, United States, but that time did not exist. And then slowly, with a new, good afternoon, please sit down. And then slowly, by about 17th century, Europe picked up the economic growth for many reasons. Because of growth of urban centers, because of the new regulations and norms, because of the growing of the own productive capacities, capitalization of Europe, jointly with the French Revolution and British Industrial Revolution, made Europe very competitive. And since then, other countries were losing their competitive advantages to the point that by 19th century it was United States, Europe, and nothing, almost nothing else to compete with. So you have this kind of the sinusoid, 15th century, 16th century, Southeast Asia dominating, then losing its power, both political and economic, and to a certain extent social. Then Europe is becoming more and more powerful. Then United States join and increase this interesting process of wealth accumulation and push the others outside the competition. And it was going like this until mid 20th century. 1960s, 1970s, the first new elements started to grow. The new countries became rapidly growing and outpacing the growth of the West. Countries like South Korea, for instance, Taiwan, Singapore, they became what we call today the South Asian tigers. Not for long. In the 1980s, the economics collapsed, but for the very different set of reasons. It's not because of the competition, because of the manipulation of the currency value by the more significant players, including United States and Europe. But this was the first time where something new started to grow. And here we are today, in which there is another swing in this process, in which China achieved in 2017, and probably it will continue in 2018, the economic growth which is almost, which end up with the GDP which is almost as high as United States of America. So China surpassed many European countries in its growth. And then something else happened with not only economic growth, but with security aspects of economic growth. China is not only growing economically, it's also growing militarily. But also something happened in Russia. Russia's adventure in Syria was the first signal that Russia can operate beyond its own borders. Means that there is a new, that it no longer US umbrella or security umbrella is as powerful as it was. So my first point is that the combination of economic factors and security factors, military factors, makes competition inevitable. This is one. Second, it's something that I will try to show you here on the board. I don't have this on my, later on you will see some of the components of this on the slides. But this is the price of commodities that are produced by China. So from almost everything, Chinese prices were going down until around 2008, 2010. Means that this sort of thing, which is obviously produced in China or in Bangladesh, costs much less in real terms than it was a few years ago. This computer some years ago cost me about $3,000. Now this piece of garbage is about $300 after appreciation, and so on and so forth. You can say that China as a powerhouse of production, of the global production, force others also to lower their prices to the competitive level that was established by the East Asian prices of production of labor and input in natural resources and energy. But at the same time, this is the line in which the real wages were established in the West, United States and Europe. Our salaries in real terms are not growing. Middle class is losing for the last 15 years. There is a constant depreciation of the earnings of the Western middle class. And then you see the difference. So the salaries, my salary is growing about 1% a year for the last 25 years. The inflation in Canada, average inflation is 3.5%, means that each year I'm losing in real terms about 2.5% of my salary. That's the reality. That's the reality of each of us who are part of the middle class in the Western Hemisphere. But the fact that my salary is losing or is not growing, it's less and less. I can buy less and less for my salary each year, does not create any social protests. It does mean nothing in a sense of my attitude towards the system. Why? Because the prices of the commodities were also going down. So this difference is the cost of the social peace in the West. People did not protest, despite the fact that the salaries are lower and lower, because the commodities and services we were buying also cost us less. But then something happened. Something happened. And it's supposed to be like that. Oh. And then something happened. And in 2010, the price of labor grew up. Not only of Chinese labor, of the East Asian labor. The price in Bangladesh, or the cost of the workers in Bangladesh, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, were going up because of the internal economic processes, and the fact that they became richer forced them to pay more to labor per hour because of the shortage of the qualified labor. So in this sense, the prices are up, and the salaries of the middle class are steadily. Now they are not going down, but they are steady since 2010. But the game is over. Now this difference shows that the Western world is losing the competition. Is losing with those Chinese, Malaysians, Indonesians whose wealth is growing while the wealth on the Western Hemisphere is stagnant, or at least at the same level. We lost something very important in this process. We lost the social peace. So we are ready to protest. We are ready to protest against our own governments. We are ready to protest against our own economic systems. We are ready to protest against the division of wealth. We are ready to protest for many other causes which makes us less competitive than we were a couple of years ago. We know that sooner or later, without new measures, we will be, as a West, we will be losing. It's not yet the case. We are not lost. We are still very competitive. But the process already is underway. So this is my second point in this presentation. And the third point is that because we understand this process of losing, we are introducing a new mechanisms in order to withstand the pressure. And Mr. Trump, who for many, Mr. Trump is tragic comic figure. People in my country didn't like him profoundly. There are wonderful jokes about him, new jokes all the time, and about the half of United States hates him as well. But the point is not so simple. This man is much more complex as far as his economic approach is concerned. Obama's approach was very sophisticated. Obama's approach was, let's agree on the new international system of tariffs that will create the largest TISA, that will create the largest free trade bloc in the world. And he was working on those in this direction. If successful, it would have been the bloc, the economic bloc, that would have about 2/3 of the global GDP, the largest bloc in the history of mankind. But then Mr. Trump came and said, no, Obama concept was wrong because of 3 reasons. One, Obama concept was, let's give some of our industries to others, but let's keep some industries and services to us, and in balance, the fact that we are putting away some heavy industry, machine industry, car industry to others, we are giving them to others, doesn't mean too much, because we will keep pharmaceutics, biological, bioenergy, and so on and so forth. So on balance, we will have the same economic growth as we had previously, but in this new environment, global division of labor, we will keep the most progressive, innovative technology for ourselves, based on the very strict property, intellectual property rights, which will eliminate many other players from the competing field. Very well. And then, but it meant that some people in Ohio, in Maryland, in New York, in Massachusetts will massively lose jobs, because Detroit would be destroyed under Obama concept, because the cars are much cheaper, or would be much cheaper produced in, let's say, in Bulgaria or in Slovakia than in United States of America or in Poland. And then Trump comes. Trump comes and his attitude is different. America first. No matter what, we don't need a new agreements. We don't need a free competition. We don't need a free market environment. We don't need globalization any longer. Globalization is over. Because globalization means that I am gaining something, but also I have to lose something to others to keep the certain balance between the players, or among the players. What Trump is about saying, I don't care about other players. I don't care whether you will tell me that I am breaking international law. Why do we need the WTO, World Trade Organization? We don't need them. They are useless. Why do we need United Nations? We don't need them. They are useless. Why they are useless? Because the time is for US supremacy. And whatever puts the barriers in these supremacies should be bent or destroyed. In this sense, he is changing the rules of the game, but changing potentially in favor of United States in the short term. In the long term, I believe that the beginning of these trade wars is not good for US. Sooner or later, the prices of commodities will be even higher in United States, and instead of paying for the umbrella $3, soon we'll be paying for the US-made umbrella $12, and obviously it will hit the budget of the middle class in United States, in Canada, in Europe as well. So this is my third point of explanation. But then there is another set of explanations. 1, 2, 3. Now, I am moving to another area, another sphere, which is related to the fact that this instability that you see around you, attacks on Russia, attacks on China, attacks on everyone who is not following the hegemonic state, are a result of the more objective process. It's not any longer about Trump or Macron or Theresa May or Mr. Putin. This is about the inbuilt contradictions in the global system. And these contradictions are not new, but they are very persistent, and for several reasons they are stronger than before. So what I am going to do right now is to list you these 5 structural contradictions of the world system and explain why these contradictions, which were present 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, why those contradictions are becoming unmanageable. And why, in the scale of 1 to 5, when these contradictions were jeopardizing the global stability in the scale of 1 to 5 at the level of 2, 2.5, now we are at the level of 4, 4.5. We are close to the full scale economic or military confrontation. So that is my second part of this chain of ideas that I am presenting right now. So, first contradiction: hegemony versus multipolarity. This is the fundamental contradiction of the world system, because it causes international system to change. Until the collapse of the Soviet Union, the system was quite clearly structured. Black and white, Soviet Union and United States, a certain stability was achieved. Local wars, but no more than the local wars. Usually through proxy wars. So-called proxy wars means that United States was trying to bind Soviet Union by the certain wars in Latin America or in Africa, and the Soviet Union was doing exactly the same by inventing the so-called socialist countries in Africa or in Latin America. Very good. But the certain stability was achieved. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, US hegemony became even more powerful. And this is over. And this is over for the reasons which we already explained, because the global economy is changing, because there are new players in the global economy, which are powerful. And potentially powerful countries like Iran, given the peaceful development for several years, can be a powerhouse in the Middle East. Malaysia, Indonesia, and other powerhouses. There are a couple of years, and they could be one of the so-called Asian tigers, like South Korea in the 1960s and 1970s. But anyway, the new players are saying, no, we would like to have a part of the pie. We would like to have a just share of the global wealth, because we are producing. If you talk to Malaysians, they are saying, I had one interesting meeting with the Malaysian economist, Jomo Sundaram, and he has shown me his iPad and told me this is the American property, intellectual property rights inbuilt in this iPad. And this US intellectual property rights costs 2/3 of this iPad. The rest is made in Malaysia and in China. So if you are paying $500 for the iPad, the labor force and materials are equal to about $120, which are paid to the Malaysian and Chinese workers, and the rest is the equivalent of the value of the intellectual property rights in this mechanism. So the players are saying this is not just. We need to more just system of distribution of wealth. Not only, there are new players in military sense. Russia is a very interesting example of the military might that with this might others should play very carefully. This is the warning signal. You cannot subordinate us, because we can go to any place in the world, and Syria is a good example. So multipolarity is becoming a fact, but still the hegemony of the United States and Europe together it will take a long time before from the hegemony it will change to multipolarity. And we don't know whether multipolar system will be more stable or not. Probably not. Because then the few players will be playing their own games. We wrote or co-edited a book which is co-edited by Professor Popov. He was working in United Nations for many years in the economic section of United Nations, and myself, and we co-edited the book Mapping the New World Order. You can go to Google and check Mapping the New World Order. This is almost inaccessible book because it costs $150 a piece, so no one can buy it, and why you should buy it. But anyway, this book ends up with a certain conclusions that the hegemony is almost over, and instead of hegemony, that will be multiple regional powers. And around these regional powers, certain clientele and periphery of these big powers will be created. So China, Russia, and a bit of periphery in Central Asia. Maybe even China herself will be able to do so. United States and United States clients, like Mexico and Canada. Then Europe, with all this 28 plus some of those aspiring to be also a players. In Latin America, most probably Argentina, Brazil, and others who will try to join them. In Africa, South Africa, and those on the periphery. So that's the emerging new economic and political order. Whether this will be more stable of the current order, I don't know. But this is the new reality in which we started to live for about 4, 5, 6, 7 years since. That is one contradiction. This contradiction is making the system very dynamic, but at the same time is dangerous, because we don't know to what extent we will fight each other with economic tools, and to what extent the economic tools will be transformed into more military confrontation. That's one. Second inherited contradiction is globalization versus identity politics. Globalization versus identity politics. And the second contradiction is interesting one, because globalization means universalization. Globalization is about universalization. Universalization of norms. You are using similar computers than we are using. We are buying the same trademarks as everywhere. We eat McDonald's in McDonald's, except that McDonald's in St. Petersburg is open until 4 o'clock in the morning, which I checked 2 weeks ago. And for me it was shock that you can open McDonald's until 4 o'clock in the morning, and in the French McDonald's you can buy wine. That's, Americans will be shocked by this as well. But anyway, this is McDonald's. And this is part of the uniformization, universalization of the world. Globalization is about making us similar in our behavior, because it's much easier and cheaper to run the global system if we are consuming similar things, if we are prone to buy things that are advertised as the best, more fashionable, and so on and so forth, and they are pretty the same across the globe. Globalization is about standardization of norms, because it's much easier and much cheaper to have one invoice form in which we are sending globally within the seconds via SWIFT system, and we do not need to translate this into several languages, but this is one form based on which we will buy, from shoes to ships to armies. Again, globalization is forcing us to use similar things, to consume similar things with the local, a bit of the local flavor. But at the same time, we are different. We don't like to have same norms and same values. And we don't like, and we would like to have our culture to be sustained. You would like to have Russian culture, probably, very much. You are attached to your language, to your history, to your poets, and so on and so forth, as the Poles or French or the Brits are. And then here starts the problem. Because there is a reaction to this universalization. The reaction is identity politics. Sometimes it is weak, sometimes it is strong. Hungary don't like to be part of the European Union because they simply don't like the aspect of solidarity to the migration policies. The Catalonians will not like Spain, because for them Spain is a continuity of the order which is coming from Brussels via European Union norms. And so on and so forth. Why this contradiction is important? Because we would like not only to be ourselves, but represent certain interests. And that is the key to the identity politics. Women will form the gender groups not because they are fashionable, but because they would like to be in different form represented in parliaments, in media, in business, in courts, and so on and so forth. The pensioners are forming in certain countries a very powerful political parties, because they think that certain countries divided their budget in such a way they prefer young people because of education and because of the kindergartens. Then primary and secondary education are more important for them than paying the pensions. So the pensioners are forming very powerful lobby groups and political parties in order to reverse the trend. And they are clashing with the young people because they are saying, who cares about young people? We should care about those who devoted their life to these countries. So there is ethnic component in this. Parties or movements, ethnicity, separatism, ethnicity, based on religion. Terrorism is part of this. Based on religion plus ethnicity plus the weakness of the cause versus the state creates a powerful set of terrorist groups, which are not only jihadists. They are environmental terrorist groups. They are social terrorist groups. They are political social groups. They are social terrorist groups. So Islamic terrorism is just a small part of the terrorist network globally, which is part of the identity politics. I would like to pursue my cause. I am too weak to pursue it. I am radicalizing because no one is listening to me. I cannot present myself because I am forced to keep my mouth shut. And therefore, what I am doing, I'm becoming a radicalized person. And that is a one step from this radicalization to become a terrorist. If I will find compatriots who will join me and think the same way, we can create whatever we need. White supremacist group in United States, yes. That's how they work. That's how they are created. So what I'm saying is that, and what is important, why these groups are important in this contradictions pattern that is destabilizing the world. It's not the problem that these identity groups are forming. The problem is that current powers, states, cannot fulfill all those expectations. And that's why this is a huge radicalization of those groups. Because state cannot simply pay pensioners more. The state cannot pay mothers more in order to put their children into the kindergartens. Ethnicities cannot separate so easily because it means the end of the national state if Russia will be divided into the, let's say, 15 ethnically based or religiously based units. So there is a certain level of coercion against them. And this coercion creates, or pressure, creates a reaction because they are becoming more and more radical because the power in given country cannot fulfill their expectations. The third contradiction, which is very important nowadays, is contradiction between wealth versus poverty. Wealth versus poverty. Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize winner in economics, wrote recently a very good book on the consequences of social inequalities for political stability in United States, in which he argues that the fact that United States is one of the most unequal societies in distribution of wealth creates the social pressures that are resulting in Trump and Trumpies, clashes on the streets, and so on and so forth, and just the beginning of the social disturbances and social protests in United States of America. But we can say the same about many other countries. In Russia recently, you saw that your parents, or yourself even, went to protest over the pensions, over the increasing of the pensional age. In case that Russia is as well one of the most unequal countries in the world. The difference between the richest 1% and the rest is huge. It's almost as Latin America. But it is global. It is global phenomenon. It's not only United States, not only Russia, it's also China. That's supposed to be the more or less socially equal country. It's the same in Europe. There are few exceptions from this process. Sweden, Denmark, in the West, maybe Canada, where we pay 45% of taxes. But there are few examples of this, of this more equal distribution of national wealth or national budget. Why this is important? Not only because I'm not advocating the Robin Hood solution, yes, that Robin Hood is Robin Hood is Robin Good, yes. So I'm not advocating that you becoming a Robin Goods, you know, that you are going to the sheriffs, takes the money and then distribute among the poor. Robin Hood was a bad person. It was pretty nasty person, in fact, because he was the part of the system anyway. So he was not anti-systemic by the end of the story. He became the noble as any other noble in the country who will have his domains. But leave him alone, leave alone the Robin Hood. This is about the social pressure that is growing. If you have a situation, 1% of the population has 82%, according to the Oxfam report, which was presented to Davos this year, 82% of the global wealth. It means that something is wrong. If Jeff Bezos' wealth is increasing by $800 million daily, the richest person in the world is earning $800 million daily. It's something wrong with the system. Not only in the moral sense, but also there are other consequences of that process. For instance, manipulation of taxes. The wealthy will not pay taxes if they are not paying taxes because they can do this in offshore companies, like Google. Most of the Google taxes are not paid in the United States or in Europe. They are paid, minimal taxes paid in the offshore companies. The same with Second Cab, the same with Apple. If they are not paying taxes domestically, means that the countries that should benefit from their production, sale and services are not benefiting, means that the countries are not taking this money to the budget, so there is nothing to divide, or less to divide. It means that there is a global manipulation of the, not only global wealth, but a global manipulation of the global tax system, in which, don't worry about this, I'm very sorry, this is one of the phones. Can you take it? This is awful thing, sorry, I don't know how to switch it off. Okay. No. So one of the consequences of this wealth versus poverty is the manipulation of taxes, which makes an effect domestically on the distribution of budgets. Well, manipulation of the prices of labor. If you are so rich, you can simply put down the global prices of labor, which is the result of this diminishing level of earning of the middle class, because you can agree on certain level of minimal wage. I can give you the whole lecture about what are the consequences of poverty in economic terms for each country. The point is that tax avoidance, lack of sharing this with those countries, lack of security benefits for labor market, manipulation of wages on the global scale, and so on and so forth, are a fact of this situation. The fourth contradiction, and I will have this pretty fast because you expect probably to have a 5 minutes break, but the fourth contradiction is state versus market. Very old contradiction, and this is also a swing policy from 1920s, 1930s, where after the global economic crisis in United States, the idea was that state should be involved in the market, that state should be more active in creating jobs and securing jobs. And then 1960s, 1970s, Thatcher and neoliberals who were saying quite the opposite, that the market will fix everything, and the market is the best mechanism for the distribution of wealth, of productive assets, and on the demand, and creating a balance between demand and supply. But now I think it's a time, and China is a good example of a very healthy balance between the role of the state and the role of the market. China is a liberal, market-oriented economy, but at the same time, state is trying to put a certain balances and checks in order for the market not to completely dominate and transforming citizens into the object of economic manipulation. Because the result of this contradiction is the level or the extent in which you and I are commodified. If the market wins the battle, we are transformed into consumers, not citizens. Then I am reducing my being to the being a good consumer. My role is to produce and to buy and to spend. But it's not only, our life is not only about that. Jesus Christ. Sorry again for this. If I will switch it off, I will never put it on. Again, so this is my life-saving device. Can I, because this person will call all the time. This is from St. Petersburg, and simply, maybe I forgot something in St. Petersburg. Maybe I pay or didn't pay. No, just maybe I lost something. Anyway, if we are transformed into consumers, the good part of our well-being is lost because we are losing being citizens. We should supposed to have at least, and to me, we should have some say of what's going on. You should have some say what's going on in this university. You should say what's going on in this country. And if you are transformed into consumers, means that I don't care about you as the citizens. You are not longer the subject of the processes. You are the object of my financial manipulation. I can buy you and sell you and transform you into a commodity. With a radical version of this, I can transform into a commodity to the point of that you will sell me your body or body parts because I can buy it and sell it. Then I can transform everything into commodity, religion into commodity, values into commodity, your nationalism into commodity, and so on and so forth. This is the result of the extreme results of the market forces winning the battle with the state. Chinese are quite good at that, and I hope that other countries are learning this as well. And the last contradiction is, before the break, is the power versus politics contradiction. Power versus politics contradiction. And here the situation is pretty obvious at the beginning of the story. Traditionally, the situation until, let's say, 1970s, 1980s, when the globalization took over and became the mainstream of development, social and political and economic development, the situation looked like that. You have a national state, you have England, Russia, France, or United States, and there are rural. There is a political elite in this country which are elected democratically or not democratically, who cares? But there are people who are ruling those countries. And then could have said the following. If I... Allora, what is that? Алло? Да. Да, можно, только быстренько, потому что я в классе, и просто я выгляжу как полный идиот, а даже не выгляжу, я полный идиот. Хорошо. Добрый день, ректор уважаемый. Так, Петр, это да. Да. Нет, неудобно говорить, но просто 2 минутки, потому что я потом улетаю быстро и мне... Так, пожалуйста. Так. Нет, нельзя. Да, Лариса, а если я вас попрошу, что вы мне позвонили в течение, через 10 минут, я окончу определенную мысль, и тогда мы сможем спокойно поговорить. Да, это возможно. Спасибо вам большое. Значит так, никогда этого не делайте, это раздражает профессоров и всех других, выключайте все свои телефоны. Я признаюсь в моей великой ошибке перед вами, просто извините, пожалуйста. Я просто, вот это единственный мой телефон, он у меня уже 25 лет, он еще идет, если я его потеряю, это будет все просто. Nokia, это было в то время, когда Finland became a powerhouse in the new technology. You remember old Nokias. Your mothers and fathers were using it, and they're very proud of that. And I still have it. And I am using this, and I was in one of the conference, and I was sitting close to the very rich Chinese. And he took this Nokia, and he had this smartphone of 6 or 7 or 8 generation, you know, that it's a voice, you can switch it on and off by looking at this device. And I put my Nokia close to me, not to, again, making a noise for everyone, and he took it, looks this, that, and he says to me, you are collector of the vintage things. А я ему говорю, какой коллектор, какой vintage, просто я старомодный. Ужас. Power versus politics, and then the break, ladies and gentlemen. So it was like this. You have the ruler, and it was the country, and Mr. let's say Nixon was saying we would like to have a war in Vietnam, and he created a war in Vietnam. He could have done it. That's the point. He was going to do it, and he did it. Mr. Roosevelt was saying the situation is very bad in the 1920s. We are doing a new deal. We are inventing a new deal. We'll invest in the huge infrastructural projects, roads, railroads, bridges, and so on and so forth. And he could have done it because the power and politics was in the same hand. This pair of hands were one. Because power is about doing. It's about A, to make B do things C would like to have. Securing obedience. That's the simplest definition of power for the first year class in political science. Securing the high level of obedience, equal power. And politics is about something else. Politics is about allocation of resources. Politics is about your choices. Whether you or your elite would like to have more schools instead of more hospitals. Or maybe the hospitals are less important than the graveyards. Or maybe we should build a huge military force in order to protect our borders, and then it will be not enough money for schools and hospitals altogether. So it's about choices. It's about choices that power will implement. It was working simply like that. And then, with globalization, situation changed dramatically. Because more and more, the real power is located outside your national state. More and more capital is located outside your capital. Russia is one of the interesting examples where this is becoming a political problem, because the number of oligarchs and the accounts outside Russia are higher than money kept in Russia, which makes them vulnerable to any pressures from outside. But this is a specific, not only specific Russian problem, it's a global problem. Not only that, but international banks, international corporations that are located in the country like Guyana, or let's say, can make a decision which are global in consequences. Therefore, national leaders can exercise much less power than before. And then politics and power is divorcing. It creates additional sets of contradictions and problems in which we have to deal with. We have to go through this, because if this is the case, then our leaders are becoming powerless. They can promise us a lot, but they cannot implement what they are promising, even if they are honest, which is 10% of the politicians. But even if there is a 10% of honest politicians, this 10% cannot deliver what they are promising. Why? Because there is divorce between power and politics, and power is allocated outside of the national state more and more. Not all the power is located outside, but more and more the capital is moving to be globalized. If this is the case, then we have a problem of Greece. That the Greeks elected a left-wing government, and the left-wing government told the world, we are not going to pay our debt. We are going bankrupt, thank you very much, and we are solving our problems. And then, in about 2 weeks from that, Varoufakis says, thank you very much, I am leaving this government. My colleague who will follow the general rules and will obviously pay the debt. It was a mistake for me to say this. So, and then the creation, as a result, the creation of the set of enemies in order to manage the internal politics of each country. But we will devote about 15 minutes on that after the short break. Okay? So, ladies and gentlemen, 10 minut, перерыва на здоровье. Where all those 5 contradictions are creating 2, or are maybe not creating, the consequence of those, or 2 consequences of these 5 contradictions are that politicians and people, those who are in the power or those who are without power, are fear what will be in the future. So what I observe is something frightening, really, because many political decisions are based on fear. So fear is not becoming only a tool of manipulation. It's becoming an essence of politics. So usually fear was used in the political campaign, in the electoral process, and so on and so forth. Don't vote for this guy because he is bad, or don't vote for her because she is cheating. Don't vote for someone else because he or she is corrupt, and so on and so forth. So it is normal. It is part of the it was part of the politics. But now there is something different. So as fear is becoming politics, means that most of the fundamental policies which are created and implemented by the state are based on fear. Look at what's going on in Europe, on policies related to migration. Policies on migration are becoming ruled by fear because people fear others. Because they will be coming and taking their places, their social benefits, they will occupy their space, they will behave not in the same way as they are behaving, and they will go to the different churches that they are going, and so on and so forth. Not only that, in time we'll get some knowledge and skills, and they may replace some people on the labor market of the natives. They will replace natives on the labor market, and so on and so forth. Fear is becoming one of the principal guidance for politics. Leaders are waking up each morning and saying, who will attack us? What we can do in Syria, for instance. This is the common fear here as I see it in the Russian television. There is a lot about Syria and a lot about the potential conflict with the United States over Syria. If you will look at the Western press, there is nothing about Syria. They do not fear Syria as a potential battleground between the systems. They are talking about the Hurricane Florence in United States. That is the main news in United States. They are talking about Bob Woodruff's new book on President Trump. In Europe, they are talking about migration and about the inability of some governments to increase employment. But Syria is not on the news. The fear creates atmosphere here in Russia that you feel that this is the most important thing in international relations. But there are other fears among other people somewhere outside this country. In Canada, the biggest fear right now is how and why United States is discussing the trade with Canada and trying to close NAFTA, which is the trilateral free trade agreement between United States, Mexico, and Canada. If we lose this, this is a trade which is huge. Every day it's 1 billion Canadian dollars, which is 900 million US dollars is going back and forth. Back and forth between Canada and this is fear. This is fear for everyone. So we fear now United States, what they do, how will do, and we are going to please Mr. Trump as much as we can in order to economically survive. And so on and so forth. And then with this fear, obviously we should create an enemy. Who is our friend and who is enemy? Fear creates naturally those who are unfriendly, those who are creating problems for us, those who are making troubles. Fear creates troublemakers, and fear creates enemies. Umberto Eco, an Italian writer who unfortunately died last year, wrote his last book. The last book title is Inventing the Enemy, in which Eco, as both writer and philosopher, discusses how enemies are created, why we should need an enemy in order to create and create the pressure on ourselves in order to be more subordinated, because otherwise the enemy will come and make order for us. So these two things, fear and enemy, are a result of those contradictions that we are talking about. But there is another even more powerful result of those contradictions. This is hegemony. Reinventing hegemonies, ladies and gentlemen. Reinventing hegemonies. why hegemony is hegemony. Why hegemonies are now becoming reinvented? First of all, to win the struggle. To win the struggle, global struggle for domination. That's one. The second reason why the hegemonies are invented is because without the hegemonies we will be not able to create or to maintain the structures that we have by now. Sorry, is it any problem?
No, sorry. I was fine.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Good. So, let's assume that there's a sort of relation of hegemony between students and the authorities, between the dean and students. The dean may create a lot of problems for you and may subordinate you in a certain way. Not only he has a material means to do so, which is part of the hegemony, but he has a legitimacy to do so, which is again part of the hegemony, because only legitimate power can have a hegemony. He is legitimized by his structure and by your image of the university as a top-down, traditionally structured institution. So let's imagine that out of the sudden you are becoming more aware of your rights and you are going every day to him and trying to change. We need a better classes, we need a better equipment, we need a better dormitory, we need better sport facilities, we need better scholarships, and we need better international exchanges, and so on and so forth. He is under pressure. And at some point, the dean, your dean, my dean, because I'm working for him as well, can face the same from the teaching staff. Give me better room, give me better salary, and so on and so forth. And at some point, the dean is losing its power. So then, the reaction would be to make or to reinvent a new hegemonies and reinvent new tools to subordinate both students and staff. And that's how it goes in the globally at the different levels of power and politics. There are different new tools that are reinventing the power because or in order to maintain certain social and economic hierarchies. This is the important sentence. To maintain and reinforce existing inequalities and social hierarchies and economic hierarchies in the world. Hegemonies are for maintaining the power. Hegemonies are for maintaining the structure as they are, because the change may come with losing some of this power. And what are the new tools in making this happen? We are starting a new project, a new book on those issues, and we first started to develop the idea what the hegemony is, how to define it, which is not easy, not simple. But then we had a conference in Berlin 3 weeks ago, and we're trying to find out what are the tools, the hegemonic tools. And apparently we came up with a quite interesting conclusions, because we came up to the idea that capital as a way of subordinating others is only part of hegemonic system. There are other new tools that are equally effective than capital. Usually we were sort of neo-Marxian approach, yes, you have capital, means you rule the world. Thank you very much. You have more money, then you subordinate others. By investment, by lack of investment, by restriction, the whole normal cycle of economic subordination through banks and so on. But this is new. But there are some new elements. You can subordinate people, for instance, just for instance, because this could be a purpose of another lecture, via social media. Who controls social media controls agenda, political and social agenda. Social media creates a certain agenda in which you are operating. This is your word, not mine. This is your word. But this word is very important because it creates atmosphere, it creates a certain patterns of behavior, it creates then new values, it creates political pressures, and so on and so forth. Social media, who controls social media? Who controls big data that can be, yes, that can be used? Who controls your numbers of passports, your credit cards? Who knows about them? Can control much more than others. Artificial intelligence in governance, where you are using the robots in order to come up with the policies that are influencing human beings. And it is used more and more in most of the developed countries. There are areas where the certain things like the pension plans are operating without almost, or with the few human beings being involved. Policy advice, another aspect. There are think tanks. I advise the government, for instance, or you advise the government, you as a specialist, experts, is there any what she wants?
We don't know. We don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Let's assume that you are an expert. You are finishing your class and you are becoming an expert, that you are advising the government of Russian Federation. Very well, I wish you that. But there are think tanks and they are advising their own governments. And what we found out is a phenomenal process of unification of the large think tanks who are advising not only their own governments, they are advising global institutions and global organizations. There are 17 of them, and they are at the headquarters of this unified advisory board, if you wish, is in Munich. And 17 think tanks that are located in Japan, in China, in Europe, in the United States, in Canada, are generating accumulative advice to Davos Forum, G7, G20, World Bank, WTO, and several governments. And what was interesting, that the 17 think tanks are trying to unify their position so they will look like one position across the globe. So there is a high level of coordination of policy advice globally. Isn't it phenomenal? This is very hegemonic. Who advises what wins the game, because others will follow the political advice. Fourth tool, which is hybrid war. We're talking about the hybrid war as a Russian invention and so on and so forth, Gerasimov doctrine since 2014 and so on and so forth. Nonsense. Hybrid war was used by United States, by Europe, by England, by France, and so on for many, many years. The idea is that the hybrid war is changing. The hybrid war is how to create the pressure on the enemy or potential enemy or perceived enemy without going to the real war. This is the hybrid war. So to enable us to stop the capacity of communication, to enable us to stop the capacity of banking transfer, to allow us to stop the media or to impose a certain agenda on the media by falsifying the facts and so on and so forth. Hybrid war is one of the incredibly potential tools in creating this hegemony. International organizations, also another sixth aspect of those tools. Look at the IOM, International Organization of Migration. This is not international even organization, this is a privately sponsored organization which gives 90% of the advice on migration to the world. So international organizations are very important in creating dominance or domination of certain type of ideas which comes in the package, ideas are very important. How you are developing them, how you are selling them to the world, how you are subordinating others with the new ideas. Neoliberalism, for instance, is an idea. It's not a proven fact, economic fact. It's idea that market should be developed to the extreme and all the barriers should be cut and all the barriers should be destroyed. This is as simply as that. And this idea overwhelmingly captured the imagination not only of economists but of the heads of the states. And what you see around is a domination of this idea since 1970s until the last crisis when this became very shaky proposal of 2008-2000. So ideas are another aspects of this. And obviously you can group this in as you are at the MA level. So, so let's complicate this a little bit because you are absolutely capable of following that. So the complication is that these tools and mechanisms you can analyze from at least four perspective, which is the liberal theory of international relations where the dominant player is the state. You can use this from the neo-Gramscian perspective in which there's a hegemony of the capital. You can use it, or you can look at this from the post-structuralist theories in which the knowledge, ideas, frames are most important in this game for the future. Post-colonialist theories in which the main question is how you are able to imitate others and become subordinates by imitation or subordinated by imitation, like Central Europe imitated the West in importing almost all the institutions because otherwise they would be not accepted to European Union. So a massive imitation of norms and institutions happened between 1989 and 1996. But so this is, you can analyze through the lenses of post-colonial theories as well. So in sum, what I was trying to present is the certain background. Without the slides, which will come, and some of the slides will somehow be attached to what I already said, but I was trying to create your way or the foundation for your way of thinking about the classes to come. The classes about capital, the classes about money, the class about migration, the class about global governance, the class about the global institutions, and so on and so forth, that you will meet those wonderful colleagues of mine who will be coming to see. Now, all those slides will be sent to you. So you will have not only access, but each lectures, and there are two sets of slides, will be sent to you. So please don't make any notes. Just look at them because there is a certain logic in this presentation. So, what is important, and I will only highlight, because it will take me another hour and a half to go through each sets, but I will only highlight the most important components of each slide. Just look at them and follow my intellectual guidance, if you wish, through those slides. This is the structure of this second half of our class, in which we will try to answer what is globalization, and we already touched upon this. My favorite among 110 definitions that you can find in Oxford Dictionary when you will click globalization. My favorite one, there are four mainstream definitions, but we will come to this. My favorite one is that globalization is a global commodification of social relations, or commodification of social relations. This is in relation to what we already said about the universalization of norms, institutions, and values. But then, drivers of globalization. Yes. Globalization is sometimes seen as following. As universalization, this one definition of globalization, in which the central and key word is universalization of behavior. Another set of definitions are based on the different intellectual premise, which is that globalization is internationalization. The third group of definitions is based on the assumption that globalization equals westernization. Because globalization, to some economists, was invented by the United States in order to maintain its hegemony. It's 1970s, and the famous presentation by the chairman of Fed, the Federal Reserve, in which he said, Mr. Somers, who said that we are inventing globalization to maintain our powerful position in the world economy. The same Somers 2 years ago said, we invented this beast and we are losing the game. So it's really a certain cycle of thinking about globalization. And my favorite one from Jonathan Nitzan is the commodification of social relations. So at least you can operate using 4 approaches or 4 sets of definitions of globalization. So, but there is an interesting play between the state, globalization, power, and state. And we already spoke about this, that the purpose of the state is obvious. The purpose of the state is control the territory, control the people, and control at least 3 processes within your borders. These 3 processes are taking control of international relations, which is the monopoly of the state. This is control over the army and so-called siłownicki, means that all pressure or military and special agencies, which includes the prerogative of the state that only the state can put you in jail. So the state can take off your freedom. And this is the monopoly of the state. No one can do it. And the third monopoly is printing money. So there are certain prerogatives of the state. They were traditionally included into the definition what the state is. And then different aspects of the state can be also the security, we already discussed. But then the question is, to what extent the state is losing the battle with the globalization or with the global forces? And we already discussed it briefly, because the more globalization, the less sovereignty. The more globalization, the less power to your local power elites. You have to share your sovereignty in order to be good citizens of global order. If you are not sharing the sovereignty, means that you are against one of the principal premises of globalization. And then you have a problem, because many states are saying, no, we don't like this. We would like to have our own sovereignty based on the Westphalian definition of sovereignty from 17th century, 1648, in which the idea or basic ideas of sovereignty were established and maintained until the 20th century. Now it is changing. Look at the European Union. In the Constitution of the European Union, there is a paragraph which says that we are pooling sovereignties of member states. What does it mean, pooling sovereignty of member states? It means that you are taking a piece of sovereignty from Poland, from Slovakia, from France, from Germany, and pulling this together and combining those sovereignties in order to maintain the European order. This is how it is structured. So globalization is forcing you to give up some of the sovereignty. And then there will be countries who will be hugely against this. Look at China, what China is doing. Look at Russia and President Putin, who is using traditional version of sovereignty in order to say, yes, we have to be independent 100%. No one will influence our, and will maintain this at all costs. But the state is losing battle. And the problem is to what extent the new balance of power will be created. That's what we already discussed. That it's easy to get power, but it's even more easier to lose power. And that is about the modern state. The modern state, few of the modern states have a capacity to control the social, political, and economic processes. And that hence the hegemony. There's a tendency of the states to recreate hegemonies in order to regain this control, which is already lost. And then Zygmunt Bauman, one of the few macro sociologists in the world, who was really capturing these processes by devising this idea of results, as a result, the idea of divorce between power and politics. Yes. But what you may say as a negative aspect, we are losing sovereignty, yes. We cannot control ourselves. But there is also a positive aspect of globalization. And I'm trying to list them. For instance, you have the non-state actors who are linked globally. Non-state actors, social networks, social webs, professional associations that are working worldwide. That was impossible before globalization. One. Another one. There is the increasing role of international institutions, which to me is a positive aspect of globalization. Because only by dialogue within the certain norms or within the certain normative system, you can withstand your own interests. The option is war. The option is conflict. So via these negotiations in which you don't have a zero-sum game, but somewhere in the middle you are losing a bit and you are gaining a bit, you can withstand and promote your interests. Civil society networks, environmental networks. My God, this is global. This is good. This is something that creates a pressure on national states on behalf of the global society. Well, in short, here, globalization and security, we discuss it. Hegemonization of the global order, more conflicts are coming than before, definitely, because of the different regional interests. Globalization and justice, globalization creates more injustices than create justice, because of this wealth distribution which is going global, not national, and therefore the national power or the national states cannot redistribute the all wealth that they're supposed to get out of production services and natural resources. Globalization and democracy, very tricky part, because I think that via globalization we are simultaneously losing democratic strength, but also we are gaining a bit. Via global social networks we are gaining something, which is that we are coming to the certain global understanding of where we are and who we are globally. But at the same time, for the national state means they're losing part of its sovereignty and losing parts of management of their own resources, which is in detriment to the democratic process, because they are trying to put this in reverse. They are trying to gain power domestically, and the result is authorization or autoratization of the governments. Very good. Globalization security, yes, we discussed it. You will have this on the slides. That I will send you. Globalization security, arms trade, blah 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 blah. Okay. This is interesting about the security that I forgot to tell you. Privatization of war, ladies and gentlemen. This is new. Sorry, in this third topic on security, I supposed to deal with this, and I forgot to do it. This is a new trend, absolutely new trend. So-called private military companies. They are, what is phenomenal in the current situation, that they are becoming sometimes as powerful as many national armies. When I was telling that the monopoly of the state is to have an army and to have apparatus of oppression on their own, this is becoming the alternative, in which they are cross-country, global, operating globally, limited companies. It's like you can go to each registration shop and you can register your company that is repairing shoes. In the same way, you can register your private military companies in Canada or in the United States or in Britain. In Russia, this is forbidden. However, the rumor is that there is one, quite powerful. But it's a rumor. So private military companies are operating outside the boundaries of the state. They have been used in many countries. Most powerful companies was Afghanistan and Iraq, in which they look at the figure from 30,000 at the beginning of the Iraqi war to 100,000. At the peak of the Iraqi war, the private military contractors, so private soldiers, were in numbers equal to the US Army being present in Iraqi soil. This is something phenomenal. Because they are not under control of the national government. They are under the control of the command, but everything what they do is subcontracted by the government. There's an issue of recruitment, financing this, accountability and control, which is almost zero. They are not under the international conventions, so you have Geneva Conventions, 5 of them related to the treatment of combatants, to the treatment of POWs, use of force and so on and so forth. Private military companies are operating outside this legal framework. It means that they are accountable to their own bosses, not to the international or domestic law. The bigger of them, or the biggest of them, they are better equipped than many national forces, and combat ready in 24 hours, which are only 4 countries in the world. They have combat ready troops in 24 hours. Most of the private military companies they have. Globalization, poverty, we already discussed it. Climate change and migration, we already all know. And democracy, yes. Another aspect of globalization is global terrorist networks. Later on, next semester, I will have a separate class for you on terrorism. The issue is that terrorism, in many cases, are a combination of those contradictions, that 5 contradictions that we are talking about. It's a combination of identity politics, we are different than you and radically different than you, so we will pursue our own interests with or without your support. There's a combination of wealth and poverty, because usually they are attracting people who are economically dissatisfied, underprivileged. They are also related to the power and politics, because those people are thinking about about themselves as a powerless. They're supposed to be more powerful because they have quote-unquote right agenda, but they are powerless because of structure of international order. Therefore, based on these three assumptions, they have to do something in the situation in which there is asymmetric force between them and the governments or other forces. So terrorism is the indiscriminate use of power in the asymmetric way against the more powerful opponents. And obviously some other components of this, the propaganda, the grievance, the claim that they are representing more powerful societal forces than they are part of this global story. And this is a global thing. This is a global thing. We used to only analyze Middle East as a hotbed for terrorism. No, no. The terrorism was born in Central Europe. It was part of the national struggle for independence before and during the First World War. You have your own Narodnaya Wola as well as a perfect example of the terrorist organization, but such a terrorist organizations like Serbian Black Hand, Iron Cross in Hungary, and so on and so forth, there are the perfect examples of those globally existing movements. In United States, there is about 40 organizations that are listed as terrorist organizations. Currently in India, in the central India, there is 350,000, according to Swati Parashar, who is one of the best Indian scholars working on that issue. 350,000 Maoist rebels who are fighting each day Indian government. 300,000 people under arms, armed and trained. Do we know about them a lot? No. They are outside our radar screen. But this is the biggest, actually the biggest existing terrorist group worldwide. Malaysia. China, Xinjiang, province of Xinjiang. Central Asia. Different types of groups in like animal protecting base terrorist groups in Great Britain. The point is that terrorism is global. If we talk about globalization, this is one of these global phenomena that that is understudied and only partly discussed because of the Middle East. That's what we discussed. Shifts in that was our. Oh, this is part of the. This is where we started our conversation this afternoon. Shifts in the global order. You will have it. Everything. Very good. And that's the end of this part of my presentation. There's another part about development, and probably we'll do it in about 40 minutes. We'll do it after a short break of 5 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, if you wish.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So short break and then 40 minutes, and we'll end our class.